might come on camera, this call is going to be recorded. So if you prefer not to be on video, then please stay off camera. So for those who have been on any of the previous calls, you'll know that we like to start off with really quick introductions as a mechanism to make sure that we're all connected and feeling as though we're in the same space and working together. As always, it is my real pleasure to say a massive welcome to everyone who's on the call, but a particular welcome to Liz Campion from Page. We really, really appreciate the opportunity to benefit from all of the insights that you'll share with us today. I'm very, very excited to report to everyone who's on the call that we're also expecting a guest speaker who, again, is going to provide some really interesting insights. We'll say more about that in a moment, but for now, we'll just quickly go around the room and make sure that we've got as many introductions as possible. So we're going to kindly ask, when I come to you, if you can give your name and what you do, and we'll keep it short and sharp today. So starting off with Tayo.
Hi all, my name is Tayo. I am currently a civil servant, so I work in the Department for International Trade in the trade negotiations team. I think that was everything, wasn't it? Nice to meet everyone.
Brilliant.
Oh, sorry. Can I just ask a question? Could you also say if you were on the call that I did about a year or so back with Horatio? That'd be interesting to know if you've heard some of the stuff I've said before. Thank you.
In response to that question, no, I was not on the call. So excited to be hearing about it today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tayo. Okay, Leon, over to you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name's Leon Cameron. So I wasn't on the call. It did a year ago. I couldn't actually access it because it's blocked on our system at work, unfortunately. But yeah, so I work at the Bank of England, and I'm quite involved in the diversity and inclusion and drive to get some inclusion on the board. That we don't really have proper representation there. So I'm quite interested to see what you have to say, Elizabeth. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Leon. And on to Toby.
Hey, Horatio, and hey, guys. Elizabeth, I was on the call last year, I think, or about 12 months ago, so I had heard some of the stuff you discussed here, so excited to be back. And just briefly, so I work at BlackRock. I'm an investment associate in our private capital business, where we just invest in middle market companies alongside private equity.
Thanks so much, Toby. And on to Frank.
Yes, hi, Horatio. Hi there. Yeah, so I think for me, I've recently completed my master's in business innovation and technology management. Looking to get back into the workforce. So I think I did hear about non-executive director programs in the past, so looking to get a bit more information here today.
Thank you so much, Frank. And Amisha.
Hi, I'm an insight analyst at Discovery. I think I was part of that conversation that you had before from my faint memory.
Thank you so much, Amisha. Onyeka, please.
Hi, I'm Onyeka. I don't think I was part of that conversation, but I have been part of your sort of focus group beforehand. I am currently a number 10 Innovation Fellow in Foreign Office, and I'm super interested in non-executive directorship.
Thank you so much. And on to Dorella, please.
Hello, everyone. Sorry, I was joining late. My name is Dorella. I'm project manager. I'm working for the financial services. I'm from Peru. I'm Latin. So I decided to join this meeting, like if you think that I could add value to you, because I know that you are looking for a more diverse group.
Thank you so much, Dorella. And on to Damilola, please.
Hi, hello, hi everyone. Sorry I'm late. My name is Damilola, but you can refer to me as Victoria. I am an accountant and I'm currently working as an administrator in a fund administration company called SAN here in London. and I heard about the program via LinkedIn because I am a member of the Diversity and Inclusion Committee in my company, and I do agree with the vision and the mission of the group of the program, and that's kind of why I joined in on the call, and I'm interested to see what we can achieve.
Thank you so much, Damilola. And for now, from what I can see, the final person, oh, we've got another who's just joined. It says F dot on the screen. I imagine that the actual name is slightly more elaborate. F dot, over to you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Fallon Winter. I'm marketing manager at MPA. We're a financial services company specializing in tax credits for SMEs and large companies. I'm very excited to be here, and unfortunately, no, I wasn't able to join last year's meeting, so I'm really looking forward to learning a lot today.
Thank you so much. And finally, I'll go to Gladys, please. And if there's anyone who I've missed from an introductory perspective, do let me know. But Gladys followed by Ayo Gabriel. Gladys, please. Okay, Gladys, unfortunately, we can't hear you at the moment, so we'll come back to you in a moment. But Ayo, please.
Hi, afternoon all. So I guess by introduction, Ayo Gabriel. I'm an executive director here at Goldman Sachs within private wealth. So I haven't been in any of the, I guess, prior conversations. Very excited to be here now. Sort of dual track, all things diversity, sign me up. For the world of NED, I'm new, but again, sign me up. So happy to help, happy to take part and hopefully go on the journey with everyone here.
Thank you so much. We'll try Gladys one more time before I hand over to Liz. Okay. Gladys, we love you. We know that you're there. So it's not letting you unmute. Okay. If you want to type in some text, then we will read that out for you, but we feel your presence. You are definitely with us, and we're very grateful to have you, as we are grateful to have everyone on the call today. So without any further ado, thank you to everyone. If there's anyone who I have missed, again, equally, please do feel free to send comments through the chat bar. But very, very happy to see Ebele. Really, really lovely to see you. And to Liz, I'm now going to put the slides up on the screen and the floor will be yours.
Thank you. Right, well, thank you all for having me today. As obviously some of you have heard what I've had to say about this before, but I really appreciate you inviting me to join you. And hopefully, some of you, there will be some stuff that we've kind of discussed before, and I'm just going to go over that for people who haven't obviously been on the call. But there is some new stuff because I actually thought it would be quite useful. I know a couple of you mentioned that obviously you're quite involved in diversity and inclusion, and actually you're wondering how you can use this or some of the ideas that we have, if it can be useful to increase diversity on your own boards. So what I've actually done is I've come up, there's a couple of things on the slides which we're going to go through of areas that you can, some ideas of where you can look, or some other people who are doing similar programs. But I've actually also invited today somebody who I've known for quite a long time, who I've worked with from a client perspective, a lady called Ebele, and she's, we're going to be doing a quick Q&A at the end, which she's very kindly said that as well as asking me questions at the end, she will also take a couple of questions. So I'm going to get on with this so that we can make sure we can make the most of our time. So I think obviously some people are looking from their company perspective, some people are looking for more from a personal perspective as to can they get into a non-exec role. I think it's quite important to actually know, to a lot of people who I speak with, and what I do is I actually recruit executives and non-executives, mainly into the public sector and social sectors. So when I'm talking to people who are working in executive capacity or kind of sub-exec, most of them don't actually understand what a full non-exec actually is. So I just thought it was really useful to start with, thank you Horatio, to start with kind of the actual definition of what a non-exec is. And I'll just read that out really quickly. I mean, you can see it anyway. So it's a director of a company who is not involved in the day-to-day management of the business, but who is appointed to bring independent judgment on issues of strategy, performance, resources, and standards of conduct. In the UK, the combined code on corporate governance requires public listed companies to appoint non-executive directors or to explain why they've not done so. So apart from their watchdog role, such directors are often employed for their prestige, experience, contacts, or specialist knowledge. That's quite an interesting quote all in itself, actually, from a diversity perspective, because I think one of the things that is really happening, and which is why I started getting involved in thinking about how we can increase diversity on boards, is because actually they're now looking at people from having a slightly different voice or a different experience. And it's not necessarily about prestige, experience, or contacts. It's more about the fact that you have a different view. So what is a non-executive director? What's the difference? I guess the main thing, and actually some of you may not have exposure to what a non-executive does. So that's kind of where I've started, where I'll start kind of going through that. So the initial commitment, what a non-executive, oh, sorry, I don't know what happened there, is as a non-executive, you would be expected to, if you're a full non-executive board member, you'd be expected to attend all main board meetings and sometimes committee meetings too, depending on the structure of your board. The time commitment that's involved with this, which is what can be quite challenging, because I think most of you are actually in professional, kind of full-time professional roles, is actually the board meeting. So most people, as with Ebele, would only have one non-executive role alongside their kind of professional career. So you'd be expected to go to anything from kind of 4 to 12, sometimes more if you're on lots of committee meetings a year. So it is, I think it's quite challenging if you're in a professional role to actually take on more than one non-executive role at a time. I think some of you may already have non-executive roles as well, so you can tell me differently, but that's my opinion. So the role is there to, and this is kind of, again, my interpretation of a non-executive director. The role is there to provide challenge, advice, mentoring to the organisations that you're working with, getting to know the organisation, meeting employees, familiarising yourself with the service offering of the business, meeting executives. So sometimes when executives go into non-executives roles, it's quite useful to get some training alongside. Normally the organizations will offer training, but it's quite useful to have training alongside that as well, because it's quite a different hat to wear when you're going to be somebody who advises the executive. You're not going to be somebody who's actually doing things. So one of the things that we've actually done, if you could move on to the next slide for me, Horatio, thank you, that I'll talk about now. So when I was going through all this, so Page Exec started to think about the fact that as a non-exec, I don't know, there's some trouble with the sound. I don't know what's happened there. Are you able to mute people? I'm not sure is that.
So I can see that everybody else on the call is on mute.
Fine,
so
okay.
I'm not sure if it's just a
maybe it's me.
Connection thing. Apologies.
No, don't be silly. It's probably me. Right. So I think, sorry, I'll finish this slide, then I'll go on to the Page Executive thing. So the reason that I think it's important with the non-executive piece is the fact that, Gladys, I think it might be yours. It keeps coming on and off mute. I don't know if you're able to. Sorry. Or maybe just stay on. Okay. Sorry. Thank you. So I think it's important for everybody to understand what a non-executive director does. So what your board is doing, because I genuinely think it's beneficial to everybody in their career. If you can understand what the board, the non-exec, are looking for, then it helps you, if you're ambitious, to actually understand what you need to be aiming at and the kind of information you should be putting together wherever you are in the organisation. And it will help you progress in your career. I also think getting a non-executive role helps you to have exposure to different organizations, different ways of working, and therefore those kind of bringing in best practice, bringing in new ideas to your organization. So I think employers generally at the moment seem to be quite keen for their employees to get non-exec roles, to give them that kind of wider, kind of more well-rounded experience. What can it add to your career? It helps you to start with that piece about the difference between the exec and the non-exec and actually what they're looking for, which is what I was just talking about. And I mean, I've put make you a more valuable employee. Well, I think it just gives you a different perspective and gives you some, kind of a different feel for things. But I tell you what, Ebele will be able to tell you more than I will about the things that she's felt it's brought in to her career. How to find potential roles. Now, this is something that I've heard from a lot of you, as in, where do you look? What do you do? And there's lots of different ways of finding non-executive roles. There's lots of different websites, which I'd be more than happy to send around at the end of the call. So there's things like, there's In Touch, there's Vasida, who I work with. There's kind of charity jobs, Guardian jobs. We look at, there's Women on Boards. There's loads of places, LinkedIn, loads of places that you can look at for these type of roles. My personal suggestion would be don't ever pay to join a website that offers you non-exec roles, but that's down to somebody's own personal preference. And the other bit that I would say about non-execs is I personally don't think you need a separate CV. When I'm recruiting a non-exec, I think it's really important to look at somebody's professional career as well as their non-executive career, because I think that makes the whole person. Some people think they need to change them. You don't. And I'm more than happy to give any advice on what I think is important in a CV if people want any thoughts on that. So the main reason that I started talking to Horatio about all this is because as a business, if you can move on to the next slide for me, Horatio, thank you. As a business, Paige started to want to do something to be a bit more proactive. A lot of our clients were asking us to recruit bring more diversity into the boardroom because they were struggling to find it themselves. So we would then go on to do a search. And what I realized was it wasn't as easy to make sure that I could bring there weren't as many people out there. And so I wanted to do something constructive. And that's why I started working with Vasida, a consultancy, to create a training program, which allows people, which is mainly to be done in businesses. And now this is something that I mentioned last time, and which is why we started talking about shadow boards. And this program, which I won't go into too much about today, because I actually think it's more important than we talk to Ebele, but it's more about the fact that so you'd get an accreditation with this program that we're doing, and this is what I talked about in quite a lot of detail last time. This is about giving you the exposure, giving you some of the knowledge, giving you an accreditation that you can take to people, but also giving you access to people and networks to allow you to look at board roles even when you're not a previous exec. So it's getting people at the more junior levels to be, as you're coming up through your career, to get advice, to get exposure, and actually to have access to board roles before, which is what I get asked for a lot, you become an executive. So because I don't think it's right to always ask for people who are executives, I think people need to look further afield to get more diversity of thought. That's my own personal opinion, and that seems to be what I get from a lot of my clients. So then I have put down here, there's a couple of links to, and I'm not sure if you can, maybe we can send them out separately afterwards, Horatio, but these are two. So Platform is an organization that I work with. They're actually in social housing, and they created a shadow board, which was all about, basically, they're like trainee board members, which is kind of what I talked about last time. And they've kind of followed that, and they've put them all on training programs. But I thought that'd be really interesting for people to have a look at. But the other one is Diversity Gap. So that is where they're looking for people to train up in education to become board members. And that is a program that you can access, like the program that we're trying to develop at Page at the moment. But I can't give you complete access to the Page program because sadly it's still in development. As I've talked to Horatio about, it's very frustrating, but we are getting there. It's just taking a lot longer than I hoped. So those are my I hope that gives you some kind of ideas and knowledge. I think here is where I'd actually like to step in and we can go through the why this is important, but I think maybe if we talk to Ebele first, if I can introduce you. She's here. So Ebele is somebody who I've known through, we've worked together for a number of years, but Ebele has actually been a non-executive for over 20 years. Sorry, I hope that's okay saying that. She's and has always done it alongside her professional career. So I thought actually talking to her would be very useful for all of you, because I think that's the biggest thing to bring out, is that you can't, I don't think you can have a portfolio not of non-execs until you get to a stage where you want to step back from a full-time career, whether it's part-time, whether it's consultancy, or whether you decide to retire early or whatever it is. I think when you're in a professional, to be able to dedicate the time to, from a non-executive perspective, I think you need to actually just look at one role initially. So welcome, Ebele. Ebele is currently the Director of Finance and Resources at an organisation called Settle. She's also a non-executive on a business called Golding Homes. But as I said, I mean, Ebele was originally from banking, has worked in social housing for a number of years, and is a qualified accountant, I guess, by background. So I'm just gonna ask her a couple of questions, and then we'd really love to invite some of you to ask myself or Ebele some questions to follow up with. So, hello.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us. So, something that I think would be really interesting to everybody here is kind of why did you originally look for a non-executive role?
My initial interest, and this is going back many years, as Liz has already let the cat out of the bag, was actually to give something back. So at the time, I had just finished my MBA. I did an MBA at Warwick Business School, and I kind of felt I had a lot of time on my hands. And also, I probably was a little bit arrogant. I thought I knew more than I did. So I thought, I've got an MBA, so let's look for an organization to help improve. So it was two-pronged. One was to put something back, and the other side of it was to try and use some of the knowledge I thought I now had. So that kind of led me to look for a non-executive role. I had a day job, but I felt I had the time and sort of like the energy to put into something else. And I wanted it to be in a sector that made a difference, as I defined it. That's not to say that everything we do doesn't make a difference in one way or the other. And so that kind of led me into looking for a role in the voluntary sector. And that actually led me to being on the board of an organization that had quite a strong emphasis around housing, but also around care.
Thank you. And what do you think you've gained from your experiences as a non-executive?
Yeah, I think especially initially, where I thought I had a lot to give, I soon learned that I had a lot to learn. And that's a very important point, and I think you touched on it earlier, Liz. Sometimes we think we know a lot, and that is true, but there's always a lot that we can learn. So I think for me, reflecting on it, especially going in originally with the thought, oh, I know everything, not everything, but I know a lot, and realizing day one, sitting on the board, that I didn't even understand the jargon, because they were saying things that, didn't make sense in normal English. Well, obviously it was the jargon of the sector. I then realized I had, a steep learning curve I needed to, climb, and lots to learn. And that was quite interesting for me to reflect on, and then go on that journey of improving my understanding so I could add value to the board that I had joined. So on reflection, I think they actually did me a favor taking me on. So I had the, if you like, academic knowledge, but I didn't have at the time any sector experience. And so I could come at things differently, but sometimes not necessarily with the depth that would have helped in some of the discussions that we were having.
Do you, what advice would you give to someone who wanted to get into a non-executive career?
I think two things stood out for me. Do not exclude yourself from any space. So the particular organization that I went on their board initially when I looked at the makeup of the board, I honestly thought they would not take me. It was the stereotypical white, middle-aged male, dominantly board thing. And at the time, so this is 20 years ago, at the time, most of them would have been probably in their 50s and over. And I was, at the time, much younger. I'm not telling you my age. That one neatly. And so I applied because I never say never, but I remember having a discussion with people close to me that there's absolutely no way. There was obviously no other person on the board that I could identify with. I can't even remember if there was a female on the board. If there was, maybe just one, and definitely no person of color, and definitely no one as young as I was. So I thought, well, all right, just put in an application and see what they make of it. And I really didn't expect to hear back, but I did. And I was interviewed, and they must have been able to pick up from the interview process that I didn't know much about the sector, but they still gave me a chance. So the first thing is never exclude yourself from any space. Don't be afraid to stand up and be counted if that's, what you want to do. And the second thing is, just have a learning attitude, be open to learn. And the more we open ourselves, so there's a level of humility that's required. The more we open ourselves to learn, the more we learn and the more value we can add back. So those two things, definitely. And I suppose the third thing is in terms of, I didn't go into it thinking I was trying to help my career, but 20 years on, I realized that it did actually help my career quite a lot because at the time I wasn't working in the sector, but I enjoyed what I was learning from that board role so much about the sector that after, I think it was probably about a year of being on the board, I then changed my professional day job to a job within that sector because I was really, really kind of energized by what the sector was doing, and I've stayed in that same sector all these years.
Thank you. I think that's, I think there's so many good points that you put there that it is. I think also what to say is, Ebele, you were working before you did a master's, but you were working before that as well, weren't you? Before, yeah. But what I think it is so useful that, and this is with anybody who's ambitious, and I sit all the time in the job that I do, that it's taking on those opportunities and grabbing them and showing that you can kind of push forward. And I think putting yourself in a boardroom in a non-executive capacity can just open up so many doors and a network as well. Because it's amazing how that can come around. One of the things that I haven't mentioned, because I know you're all from very different backgrounds sector-wise, which obviously Ebele's just been touching on the sector thing, is that I think it's a lot of people, and you're lucky if you don't, but a lot of people will look at an initial kind of non-remunerated role to actually get a foot in the door, to get some experience, which a lot of the people that I'm dealing with at the moment, that's what they're doing. I don't know. Do you mind me asking, was your first role, was it paid or unpaid, the first one?
It was unpaid, actually.
Yeah.
And was unpaid for, I ended up sitting on the board in different guises for 9 years. And I ended up doing it for the whole 9 years unpaid.
Yeah. But I think that's very, very common. And if you don't, if your first one is remunerated, wonderful. But I think it's a really good foot in the door and it allows you to get that experience from a non-executive perspective. But yeah, I guess the next thing would be to say, unless there's anything else you want to add, Ebele.
No, I'll be interested in answering questions, obviously. So it's time to find out what people want to know.
Absolutely. Well, look, thank you. I really appreciate you joining us today. And I will open it up to the floor. Does anyone have any questions at all?
I saw that there was a question from Frank.
Yes, indeed, which got answered literally as soon as I was about to ask the question. I think I was going to ask, you mentioned the difficulty that you faced initially, so wanted to find out, what that was like. But I think you touched upon the fact that you actually entered an industry that you had no experience in, not excluding yourself from the space and also the learning attitude. So I think, those sort of touched upon, because I also just finished my master's, and I think, just as you were saying, you think you have a lot to give, but yeah, there's actually quite a lot to learn on the other side of things. So I wanted to ask about how you actually came over that challenge initially in your career.
Actually, lots of hard work. I think Liz touched on this earlier. So I was holding down a full-time job, and then I took on this voluntary role on the board. And actually, I underestimated what's the amount of work that would be required because I hadn't factored in the learning bits. So whereas my colleagues could potentially take the board papers and read them and understand, for me, I had to do some homework to try and understand what those board papers were saying because I wasn't sort of entrenched in the sector. So it was taking me much, much, much longer to prep for meetings.
What industry were you in whilst working?
So I was in the financial services sector, and then obviously working in on a voluntary basis in, let's call it the housing and care sector at the time. So I found that I had to prep a lot and put the work in, and I also had to engage with the organization a little bit more. So I had meetings, I requested meetings with members of the executive, the finance director specifically, to make sure I understood the context of that industry. So I wasn't just asking, it's okay to ask silly questions, but it's better to do your homework and still ask silly questions, but silly questions that are a little bit more meaningful, that add value to the organization.
Thank you, Ebele. Appreciate that.
Thank you. I'm just looking for any further hands that are up. Whilst we wait for any hands to shoot up, I did have a really quick question myself, which was just around managing conflicts of interest. So whether this is within the workplace or even in a personal context, you now have a non-exec role who are expecting quite a bit from you. You will have your family responsibilities as well as your other main role responsibilities. How did you kind of manage what you were going to do when?
Yeah, to be honest, it's going to sound like a cliche, but you've got to put the work in and you've got to just be very good at juggling. So at some point, it's not for the faint-hearted. You have to be clear. I think one thing I learned very early on is understand why you're doing it. Because if you don't understand why you're doing it, then it's easy to give up because it is a lot of work. And for me, the first 9 years, in fact, up till now, the board I sit on, I do get a little bit of a stipend, but it's not because of the money. I mean, the money in this sector is not as much as it is. It's not a FTSE 500 setup or anything like that. So you've got to be sure you want to do this and then put the time in and then just hope that your family circumstances can support what you're trying to do. So credit to my family. They supported me 100%. At the stage I had young kids as well. So I went into it without kids and then I had 2 young kids and my kids grew up with me, sometimes taking them around meetings and them waiting for me in all sorts of places. It's doable, but one has to really be committed to it and put the work in. So working weekends, working late in the evening, working early hours, you know. It's fulfilling. I love what I do, but there's lots of hard work required to support it.
Thank you so much. I can see that there's a question from Damilola, and just to highlight to everyone on the call, this Q&A is not unlimited. We would love for Ebele to be here forever, but she won't be. So if you do have any questions, get your hands up now, and we will be closing off relatively soon. So I can see Damilola, that we followed by, people are listening now. Damilola followed by Onyeka, followed by Ayo. So to Damilola first, please.
Thank you so much, Horatio. Thank you so much, Ebele, for coming out here and talking to us. It was really inspiring and a bit challenging to hear the things that you have to say and the path. But my question is from when Liz touched on the CV about not preparing a separate CV for this kind of roles. I guess I wanted to ask, is there like a personal aspect to the CV? Do you include any kind of not personally identify information, but maybe kind of more of your personal hobbies or interests rather than your day-to-day job role? in the CV in order to be able to get these kind of non-executive director roles?
So I think it would depend on what those day-to-day activities are. If, for example, you're applying for a role, I don't know, with Sports England, to be on their on their board, for example, and you're an active hockey player, or you play netball, or you play football, then maybe that's something to bring out in the CV, because that shows an affinity with what the organization's aims and objectives are. In my case, I just had a one-liner that says loves traveling and reading. And that was all I needed to add, because the context of, the organizations I was applying for, I didn't think I needed to make more of that. I mean, I could have said I like African history. What's that to do with housing and care? So it has to be sort of related to that role, in my opinion. If you can make a link between what you're doing in your sort of private life through a hobby to what you're applying for, then yes. If not, focus on the professional side of what you've done. And it could be that there are activities that you may have carried out that you don't even think about. So some people do what I call low-level voluntary work that they don't think is as meaty, so they don't mention it, but do step back and think about everything low level that you may be involved in and see if there are any links. And if there are, then by all means, put it on the CV as well.
I agree with that 100%. The number of people that I talk to for non-exec roles, and then I'll interview them, and they'll be like, "Oh," and I'm like, "You've never done any charity work?" "Well, I used to be a trustee on this charity, and I used to do this," and you're like, "This is all relevant." So yeah, definitely anything that you can think of. But going back to your question, I would say, I think your professional career is usually put it on there, and there are, like Ebele saying, other things that might link to the whatever role that you're going forward for is definitely the right way to go forward for it. But most of the time I'm looking at kind of people's professional career as well. It's really important to keep it on there. Don't take things off. That's my advice.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, appreciate it.
Thanks, Damilola. Swiftly, we will move on to Onyeka, please.
Hi, I had a question around conflict of interest in this, strategically trying to use your director role to sort of further your own career professionally. How do you manage if you are privy to information as a result of being a member of the board that might affect your day-to-day work, or vice versa? I don't know if you've ever been in that circumstance, but it'll be interesting to get your take on that.
Fortunately not. I haven't been involved in that in a very, let's say, in a massive way, thankfully, because that would be tricky to manage. But there are procedures in place. So if I did feel there was a potential conflict of interest, I'd need to declare that. And that would need to be noted quite formally. And depending on what the company's policy is, then that route should be followed. So for example, if there's an agenda item that I might have a personal sort of connection with, I would have to stand down and not participate in that agenda item as a board member. And if I feel that I'm privy to some information that might help my day job, fortunately this didn't happen, then again I would have to declare that. And if it became too if the conflict was long and lasting, then I might need to think about stepping down from a particular board. Obviously, I won't leave my day job, stepping down from a particular board if the conflict was great. I think it's a good question you ask, because now that I work in the same sector as where I serve as a board member, I always try and stay clear of applying for board positions that I think might lead to conflicts. And that's easy to achieve by just changing geography. So if I'm on the board, for example, in one part of the country, then I'll be working in another part of the country, because it's very unlikely then that there would be a massive conflict of interest that arises. So it's a good question. Bear that in mind in terms of, where you look for your opportunities.
Thank you so much, Onyeka, for that question. So on that basis, we've got 2 final questions. For anyone else who does have any further questions, do feel free to send them via email. But we did raise the warning beforehand, so we'll take both questions at the same time. Ayo followed by Dare. Ayo, please.
Firstly, thank you again, Ebele, for your time. I think always encouraging to see, someone either similar to yourself, but to have been an NED, as was said, for the last 20 years. I think it's encouraging for all of us. When I think of your 20-year journey, I guess the question I have is, one, what are the biggest differences you've seen for someone applying for an NED role today versus when you first started? I assume there will be significant differences. And from the lessons that you've learned over the last 20 years, if you were starting again today, looking to, take on NED roles, what would you do differently, or what have been your biggest lessons sort of learned so far?
Great question, Ayo. And then we'll quickly take Dare's question as well.
Hello. Yeah, my question actually touches upon Ayo's last question, was if you were to apply for a role in this day and age, comparing it to when you first started 20 years ago, what due diligence would you do? You've touched upon, obviously, conflict of interest as well as time commitments. Are there any other areas that you would advise us to consider before applying for a role?
Okay, I'll take Dare's question first. I think it's very important that you have a passion for what you're going to put your time and energy into, in my opinion, because it's involving and it would require sacrifice on your part, even if it's just the evenings you give up to read the board papers. So my advice would be, look for roles in a sector or in an organization that you align completely with their values, or you're passionate about what they're passionate about. And that will see you through the ups and downs that would no doubt come in terms of your ability to continue to service the needs of that organization, especially if it's a voluntary role. So the worst scenario would be doing an unpaid role and it's not something you like, or you don't agree with, the ethos of the company. And make sure it is aligned with your values, and you feel this is an organization you really want to bat for, would be my advice. So in terms of Adeayo's questions, I think when I look back over the 20 years, I think there's much more awareness now than there was 20 years ago around diversity. And it's not just diversity of, sex or color, just a whole broad range of diversity that's talked about today. 20 years ago, it wasn't as it wasn't as socialized, quite frankly. And I was in spaces where I was the only female, only Black woman. There are so many spaces that I was entering where I don't think people knew what to do with me sometimes, and I don't think people sometimes had encountered me, and they genuinely struggled to engage with me sometimes. So I could give you some funny examples, but I'm sure you all have stories that you yourselves can tell. I feel as if, therefore, now it should be slightly easier because people are more aware and people are more thoughtful about diversity issues. And so that should be a plus for anyone looking for a role these days. On the flip side, though, 20 years ago, there were, I think, certainly in the sector I'm involved in, a lot more voluntary opportunities. And what's happened over the years, and it's great for the sector, what's happened is that the board roles have professionalized over time as the organizations required more and more sophisticated, if you like, talents, advice, support. So whereas 20 years ago, it was probably easier, I think, to pick up a voluntary role. Today, maybe there are not as many, and maybe boards are looking, and hence some boards have moved over those 20 years to start paying board members because they want skill sets that they feel they require to drive the business forward. And so they might be a bit more prescriptive about the kind of people they interview and people they take. But having said that, I am aware that there's talent out there. So I feel it's still important for us to put ourselves into the spaces we want to be in. Even if the roles may not seem to be all over the place, still go ahead and look for them and apply. So I don't want that to come across as, oh, there are not enough roles, I'm not going to bother. Please don't take that out of what I'm saying. But factually, I think voluntary roles are fewer in my sector. I don't know about other sectors. But that doesn't mean people shouldn't try and get to the roles that they are. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't even just try and get a paid role straight away.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I think there's I think the difficulty is at the moment more executives realise it's important to get non-exec roles to progress their careers, and therefore now those voluntary roles are harder. I think there's still quite a few around, maybe not in the sector we're talking about, Ebele, but in other sectors. But I think there's more competition for them now. Because I think everybody, I mean, whenever I recruit an exec, one of the questions I get asked is, have they been on have they had a non-exec before? Have they had that exposure to board, even if they've got exec experience before? So I just think I think there's more competition than there probably was. Certainly when I started recruiting about 20 years ago, and that's definitely changed. Yeah.
The second part of the question from Adeayo was, what are my reflections over the 20 years? Is there anything I would have done differently? And I don't know, I hope this doesn't come across arrogant, but I don't think so. I think I was fortunate to get a role. Probably my mindset would have been different. So I wouldn't have gone in thinking, oh yes, I have an MBA. So maybe that bit, yes, I would probably have got in a little bit more. Yes, okay, I need to learn. But I quickly got there. I have to tell you, I quickly got there because I started meetings and I was like, oh my word, I need to learn a lot. So I quickly got that there on that scale. I think reflecting on it, there was a level of naivety in what I did because I didn't understand how big a thing it would be to sit on a board and the time commitment and all that. But I actually don't regret that naivety because I'm stuck on it for 20 years simply because of, how I feel about that part of my, what I call my putting back part of what I do. It means a lot to me, and I'm glad that I've had the opportunity these last 20 years to do it. And I really I've tried to, in my time, encourage as many people onto boards. It's one of the reasons why I agreed to come and speak here today. I encourage as many people who feel that that's something they want to do so. It's very rewarding. It can be hard work, but it's also very rewarding. And as Liz said, you build networks, you get to know people, and that in itself is a positive as well.
Thank you so much, Ebele. We know that you have to leave us imminently. There was only one very quick question which I missed earlier from Sanjan, sorry Sanjan, who asked, how many hours roughly do you spend on your non-exec role and how much face time does that come with?
Okay. I'm smiling because whatever I say is going to be sort of specific to me. Each role will come with its own sort of time requirements, and usually if you're applying for a role, they would give you an idea of how many hours they think the role would require. But bear in mind, I said when I first took this on, I found I had to do my own extra reading and put in my own extra time. So if you're coming to it fresh, whatever they tell you, probably add some to that, because I think until you get into the flow of it, you'd need to do extra work. In my current NED role, I also sit on 2 committees, audit committee, and I chair the treasury committee. So time commitment wise, if we have, for example, treasury committee, audit committee, and a board meeting all in 1 month, which is typical, it doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen from time to time. Then in that month, I'm probably putting in at least an additional 3 hours a week to cover the committee and the board papers. But bear in mind, this is after 20 years working in the same sector. I know what I'm looking for. I know how to go to the important parts of the papers. You know, I know the bits to not worry too much about because I understand what's going on there. I know where to focus. So that's why I'm saying it really then depends on, you know, obviously different people's understanding of, you know, the sector, what the meeting requirements are. I now have the privilege of quite a lot of sectors experience as well as subject matter experience, and that helps me in how I prepare.
Thank you so much, Ebele. And I know that it was suggested that you may need to leave early. So from everyone who's on the call, you can see the excitement. We have really, really appreciated having you. We've learned so much. We hope that if there's one thing we take away, it's that anything is possible. Give it a go. Research is definitely a must, but don't rule yourself out of it before you potentially give it a chance. Thank you so much, Ebele.
Thank you.
And I wish everybody well on your journey. And it'll be good to see all of you on different boards in the future. Take care, everyone. And thanks for inviting me. Bye.
Thank you.
So Liz, we're back over to you.
Oh, well, I think that's us kind of finished, actually, unless anybody's got any other questions. I think it sounds like hopefully people got some useful insight from Ebele. She's somebody who, oh, maybe not.
Apologies.
Hi, yeah, apologies. I joined a bit late, so it may be a question that's already been asked. But I was exploring about how to go about shadowing more, because I've had the opportunity to observe, but wanting to do more around the shadowing part so one can learn more of the skills required to be an ed. Because often, I guess when you're trying to interview, it's you being able to articulate that as part of your covering letter and application. Have you got any thoughts or advice on that?
On how to achieve a shadowing role?
Yeah, or just being able to shadow so that it brings you closer to being successful in a role.
I think that's, so initially when I first started talking to Horatio, that's something that I really, that I believe would be really useful. So what you're saying, Serena, I agree with, and I think it would help people achieve positions, non-exec positions better. There was in the slides, which we can send around a separate email, can't we, Horatio, afterwards? In the slides, there was one company that I've come across that I think have done a proper shadow board, and it's not because there's only one company that's done it, but I think they've done it well. So I thought that'd be useful for you to have for everybody to have a look at, and obviously when those roles come up, then you'd be able to apply for them. But there's also an education program. Did you see that? Were you on for when I talked about that?
Apologies, I wasn't, no.
So Horatio can send that link through as well. That's another opportunity for you to have a look at, which is where they're helping train people up and you get the opportunity to shadow. And that's something that Paige are working on at the moment as well, to see how we can help people become kind of shadow board members. But I mentioned earlier on in the call that frustratingly for me, the program's taken a lot longer because we're such a big company. It's taken a lot longer to launch than I would have hoped. So also Horatio will be able to send stuff around about that as and when that happens too.
Thank you, much appreciated.
Good luck with it.
Before we come to the end of the call, are there any other questions? Please feel free to raise your hand. Whilst we're waiting for people to raise their hands, I'll say once more, a really, really big thank you to Liz. As you would have seen from the call and from all of our engagements with Liz, Liz is someone who knows her stuff far, far more incredible than she would humbly perhaps suggest. But actually, it's been a real privilege to be able to get all of the insights that she's been happy to share. And we really appreciate all of the time that you've been able to put into this project and to work with us to provide these opportunities that people will be able to access. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your insights, Liz. We really, really appreciate you and hope that we will continue to learn more in due course. But I can see that there are no further hands at this time. So, oh, okay. I say that and it comes through. So over to our hand.
Sorry, it's just a quick question. Is it okay to connect with you on LinkedIn, for example?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. I think some people did from the call last time as well, and yeah, I'm absolutely happy for that. And I did say to Horatio actually when we were talking before the call that if people have like the occasional question, or they're getting frustrated with their search, or there's anything that I can do to kind of point people in the right direction, if you connect with me on LinkedIn, I'm more than happy to answer or to kind of help in any way that I can. So yeah, of course.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Horatio, as always.
No worries. Okay, any final words from you, Liz, before I close the call?
Yeah, well, I just firstly, thank you for having me today. I really appreciate being given the opportunity to kind of talk to you all, and hopefully I've been able to give you, even if it's just one thing to help you on your journey to becoming a non-executive, then that's a good thing. I hope that you enjoyed the kind of the brief interview with Ebele. I think she's great. She again, I would say, is a very humble individual who has been a CFO many times and is now kind of basically deputy, and has been on boards, as we said, for many years, and has lots of different exposures and a huge network, which I really think the more you can do to kind of broaden your horizons and meet more people and increase your network will help with all of this, either your professional career or your non-exec career. But I just wish you all luck, and I hope good luck with your endeavors. And as I said, any questions, I'm very happy to answer them. So thank you for inviting me. Thanks, Horatio.
Thanks once more to Liz, but thank you to everyone who has taken time to be part of this call. As customary, we will be sending you all of the information that we receive. This is in relation to information that's available now, in addition to any further opportunities that are, again, that might be of interest to you. So do stay in touch and we will send over to you. But moreover, as has been highlighted as part of the program previously, at some point, we would love to be able to do some level of kind of physical get together as well, giving all of you on the call not only the opportunity to learn more in the kind of non-exec space, but to connect with each other. As mentioned by Liz, that network piece being really important. We hopefully will be able to facilitate those. So watch out, those are coming soon. But for now, do have a lovely afternoon. Great to see you all. Thanks to Liz again. Thanks to Ebele. Thanks to all of you. Speak to you soon. Take care, everyone.
Thanks.